Hello, breadwinners. Today we are doing another live Facebook stream so that I can show you a few things about proofing and about baking in the home oven. So you see that I'm at home in my kitchen today instead of at Easy Tiger. So it's great to have you into my home, and we're going to be doing some Dutch oven cooking today, Dutch oven baking. So we'll also look at proofing. I have a couple of examples. I have one that I think is just right, ready to go, and I have one that's not ready, and one that's back here that's kind of over ready. So we'll look at those too, and I'll try to explain what I'm looking for, what I'm feeling for, and show you the different things. And then we have some questions that I can answer. Yeah. So it's again, it's this breadwinners group has just been so fun. It's fun to see the interaction between all of y'all, and I just enjoy going on there every day and looking at the pictures of your fantastic loaves. And yeah, it's been fun. So I've even been baking at home a little bit myself. And we have some exciting announcements coming up about our 10,000 loaf challenge. I think we've actually hit our goal, which is cool, but I'm not going to spoil that one. Yeah, we have continue to have lots of exciting things going on at Easy Tiger. This coming week, we're going to be offering more menu items through the drive-thru and delivery. Pastrami sandwich will be back, so you see I'm getting my rye starter going again so that we can make rye bread for the pastrami sandwich. I'm sure a lot of you will be happy about that. I bet I'll have one early in the week too. So yeah, we're excited about that. Well, I do have a loaf that I've been baking, and so let's check on it first. There we go. Yeah, this one looks pretty. Now it sounds pretty done too, so that's good. All right. So for this one, I'm using what is referred to as a combo cooker. So it's a cast iron skillet like this, and then a bigger, deeper skillet like this. And normally, if you're cooking, like if you're making a stew or something like that, you would have this as the bottom, and the skillet would become the top. And of course, you can use them separately on top of the stove and do all kinds of things. They're very handy. But in this instance, for bread baking, I really like this setup, probably even better than the Dutch oven, because you can invert it. So you see that I'm using the skillet as the bottom and the deep skillet as the top. Because then when I have my loaf in there, like when I first put my loaf in there, it's easy to score without those high sides. I've got a Dutch oven in there heating up now that I'm going to show you how we do that, but this combo cooker works super well as well. And then, so with Dutch oven cooking or with a combo cooker like this, or even like a Pyrex casserole you could use, what you're doing is the lid part is trapping the moisture from the loaf, and that is creating the steam, the moisture that you need in the beginning for your loaf to expand properly and to set this nice crust. But you want to use, now you notice that I didn't have the lid on when I pulled this out. You want the lid on for just about the first 20 minutes or so. That allows for that full expansion. Then you take the lid off and the crust can finish baking and bake up nice and crisp. That's a really, ooh, listen to that. Beautiful, beautiful. All right, I'm going to take it back out of here so that it can cool down. And this one's hot, so I'm going to move it over here. All right, so I have this loaf right here, and this one is a nice proof. So let me see how I can show you this the best way. So I'm pressing in, oops, there, I'm pressing in, and it's coming back, but slowly. It's coming back, but very nice and slowly. And so that's one indication. but also I just feel the loaf itself, and to me it feels like it has air in it. It feels light and airy, but it still has structure. It still is holding up even when I touch it and play with it a little bit. You don't want to play with it too much, but. So this one, which was shaped just about a half hour ago, you notice now, actually this is a good illustration because I press in and it's springing back kind of slowly. So that's not always the most reliable test. So, but if I push just a little bit, it comes back pretty quick, like that. See? Boom, boom. The lighting is horrible in here, but mainly it just feels dense. You can see it's also quite a bit smaller. These are the same size loaf. It's quite a bit smaller. So once you know the size of your loaf and the proof that you're looking for, the size can also help. You know, this is about doubled in size. This one hasn't even, this hasn't risen much at all. But it's also just, it feels dense and it doesn't have the air in it like this one does. This one over here though, you can see it's risen even more. There we go. And when I press into that one, it barely comes back at all. And it's kind of even, it's like it feels like it's going to deflate if I do too much pushing on it or anything. So this one is overproofed. Now this one, it's not so overproofed that it wouldn't be salvageable. You could still probably bake this, but I'll show you a little bit about how to score this for baking it so that you can rescue that one, because it's definitely overproofed. It's not going to be the perfect loaf, but at this point I would still probably go ahead and bake that one. It'll still turn out to be a nice bread for you, just not perfect. Okay, so let me grab out my Dutch oven. A couple of towels here. You notice I have like a trivet here. This is actually one of the grates from the stove. But you need a spot where you can set your Dutch oven and a spot where you can set the hot lid. And then I'm going to take my nicely proofed loaf with the parchment and just drop it in there. And then my scoring knife. So what you can do, especially if you have a nice proof on it like this, you could put it out here and score it. Quickly. See, I've scored it, but then just drop it into there. Fix my scores, but see, it's a little bit difficult to get down in there to score. That's why I like that combo cooker a little bit better. But the Dutch oven, I baked a loaf in it this week, and it came out beautiful. It was really nice. So get that back on there real quick, and right back in the center of the oven. There we go. So that's great. So let's take a look now at this overproofed one. Let's see if I can get it in the spot where maybe just tilt you down there a little bit for a second. And you see how it's spreading quite a bit more? So this is kind of overproofed. But what I would do is just a really shallow cut. Not too deep at all. There. Just kind of like that. Very shallow cut. And so again, this is not going to be the perfect loaf, but it's still not so overproof that it will still have some spring and it'll be a decent looking loaf. Just not perfect. In fact, so I could show you later, why don't I just pop this back in the combo cooker here. It's not preheated exactly right either, but we'll throw it in there next to that other loaf and I can take pictures and post it later. Got the oven on hot. So, there we go. Okay, and so this loaf, again, it's not ready yet. If for some reason you really felt the need to bake this, you could cut it deeper if you think it's underproofed. But it's better just to give it a little more time. Unless, I don't know, you have company coming in 20 minutes and you really need to have that bread in the oven. I don't know. But no, I would just make sure that you keep this covered and let it keep going. All right, so that's Dutch oven baking. And so again, anytime you have that covered vessel that you're baking in and you want to preheat that vessel because you want it to transfer that heat, that's why the cast iron, either enameled cast iron Dutch oven or that the cast iron combo cooker, they hold heat really well. They're like a mini brick oven inside your oven because they're holding that heat and then they're also holding the moisture in. So you don't need any kind of extra steaming contraption or pan or anything when you have the lidded container in there for your baking, because that's achieving that. It's like holds in that moisture. When I worked in New York City, I had a brick oven for one of my jobs, and it was the most beautiful oven, and it was such that the deck kind of rotated around and you could load and continuously load and unload bread. And it held the moisture so well that once we steamed a little bit before the first load went in, but as long as we kept baking, we never added steam to it because the moisture is being held inside that oven so well. And I was the best bread that I love that oven. I wish I had it back. So we do have a few questions that I'd like to answer. And the way we're set up today, we're not really set up to get live questions right now. Some of the crew back at Easy Tiger is going to try to answer some of them. If you have questions, go ahead and send them. That's great. But also, I will read the questions later and get back on the group and answer some questions later on this afternoon. But I do have some questions that we got ahead of time. Jen G said, what is the main difference between cold proofing and proofing at room temperature? Is one better for bread baking? So there are lots of cool schools of thought on this. And that's, again, one of the cool things about baking is there's so many different ways. There's not one right way. I happen to have chosen the style after doing all kinds of different ways for over 30 years. For Easy Tiger, I selected the style of what we call ambient proofing. So we do everything at room temperature. We fortunately have good air conditioning and we control our room temperature very nicely. So it's not super hot, but we like to run around 72 to 75 degrees. And we keep our dough temperatures in that same range. But our bulk fermentation, the fermentation before we shape the loaves, and also the proofing, the final rise before the bake, in between shaping and baking, are both at room temperature, at ambient temperatures. We do have a proofer that some of the things that especially go in our convection ovens, like our pastries and our hamburger buns, those kind of things, we do run those through a proofer, but again, it's not super hot. It's just a warm and moist environment with humidity that keeps those products moving consistently, so that we, from one day to the next, we kind of know the hamburger buns are going to take an hour and a half, and we can kind of count on that without the variations in the room temperature. But all of our products that go in the deck ovens, the hearth baked breads, those are all at room temperature proofing. So it's a style I like. I like the results of it, but there are many bakeries that produce fabulous bread by doing cold fermentation. And cold retarding during the proof stage. One of the things that it's not my particular favorite thing about that cold proof is that you tend to get a little bit thicker and tougher crust, and you get a lot of bubbles on the surface. And some people really like those bubbles. It's like this flakiness that kind of comes, but it has a toughness that's not my favorite way. So I prefer the ambient temperature proofing, especially because I like the crust results that come of it, and I like the flavor that we develop. And we use a lot of pre-ferments, whether it's sourdough starters or yeasted starters, to build up the flavor. So anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying you can do it either way. It's but you will get different results. So that's what we do. We do all ambient proofing. What are the signs to look out for if the bread is proofing too quickly? and how best to react. So that's and then I stuck that one in the oven. But what you're looking for is if it's proofing too fast, it's gonna start. One thing it can happen is it starts to dry out a little bit too much on the surface, and also, yes, you will get those big bubbles that I think you saw those a few minutes ago before I stuck it in the oven. Even this one, you have some surface bubbles, but as those start to grow too much, these surface bubbles, that's one indication that you're getting on in your proofing. So you just find a cooler space, or you can slow it down in the refrigerator if you need to. But most of the time, you're not gonna, if it's just at room temperature and not right over on top of the hot stove or anything, then you're going to be fine. Just, and if it takes an hour and 15 minutes instead of an hour and a half and it's ready to bake because you feel it's ready to bake, just go ahead and bake it. That doesn't matter. One person is having trouble getting a banneton to work. This is a banneton that we have. Of course, over time, they just have some flour in them, and so when we're using them, we use a sieve to do it, but we're putting in some flour, about like that much. It's hard to see probably. But this person was having trouble with it releasing from that, and asked is there any value over proofing in a lightly oiled bowl or in a bowl lined with parchment. You saw that I have been proofing with the parchment right in there because of the Dutch oven proof baking, because you can just pick this up, and especially with the deep Dutch oven, you just plop it down in there. So this is great. I would avoid the oil just because you're not going to get the best crust if you have oil on it. It's going to prevent that moisture from getting in there and from really caramelizing the crust like you're looking for. So I would avoid the oil bowl for the final proof, and either do it with linen or a banneton, but just, you can rub some flour in there and then sprinkle a little bit on top too. But I would work with that. But the oil part is what I would avoid doing. So somebody also wants to know if you can overwork the dough after the long rise. Yes, so you do want to, and unfortunately I don't have a dough that's ready to be at that stage. I had all these set up instead of having that one. You want to be gentle with it. What you definitely don't want to stretch it so hard that you're tearing the surface. It doesn't matter if you knock some of the air out, but it depends on what you're looking for. If you want more open crumb, be gentle with it and just fold it and try to keep some of that air in. But that's what the final proof is this building back up the carbon dioxide inside to leaven the bread. So in the long overnight fermentation stage, you've built up the flavor and the acids and things that are giving it good flavor and making it keep longer and be delicious. In the final proof is when you're leavening the bread and making it lighter. So don't worry about pushing out too much, but just be gentle with it. So another person was asking us to do kind of what we did. I hope that you got some value out of the different loaves. And Donna wants to know, how does over or under proofing affect ability to score? I think I touched on that too, but like I said, if it's overproofed, you need to be very delicate with the score. Just barely score the surface. Don't go too deep, or you'll make it deflate even more. If it is underproofed, a deeper cut, but if it's underproofed, just let it proof a little bit more. Is what I would try to do. I've been curious about doing a final overnight rise in a bread pan, then baking directly in that pan, but I'm afraid the crust won't be any good. I have Dutch ovens and those are working well, but I'm curious about bread pans, cookie sheet, pizza stone baking, if those are successful too. I've had a lot of success with all of those. The crust depends on that moisture. So if you're doing the Dutch oven baking or combo or a casserole or something where you have a lid, you're capturing that moisture. And that's great for home baking because it's harder to get to keep this moisture from steam in your oven. But it can be done. And if you look back at the video that we made, I have some techniques with the pizza stone, and I use a skillet, the cast iron skillet that I put some lava rocks in, or some metal like some bolts or some chain or something, just something that heats up really well and has a lot of surface area that when you pour water into it, it creates steam. And then the other trick is to try to get the steam in the oven and keep it there. So that's where I use that sort of long-ended automotive funnel. But you don't have to have that if you don't. You can just make sure that when you're adding water to your steaming pan that you do it as quickly as possible and get that door closed so the steam stays in there. But like I said, with Dutch oven cooking or anything that has a lid, you are capturing that moisture itself to let that loaf expand and set the crust without needing to create steam. But if you're baking on a cookie sheet is fine. Again, I would preheat that cookie sheet so that you're getting some heat transfer. The pizza stone, of course, holds heat better and longer and gives it to the bread more readily. But a sheet pan will work just fine too. You can use a pie plate. You can use all kinds of different things. And a bread pan would be fine too. Now, you're not going to get the crust on the sides in a bread pan, but you can still get a nice crust on top. Again, try to create a little steam in your oven, moisture in your oven for that bake. But in terms of like proofing in the pan, even overnight in the refrigerator, again, you might get a little bit tougher crust from that long proofing in the refrigerator, but it'll turn out just fine. And Pat B wants to know the best way to plan baking if you want to bake during the day and not have to be baking at midnight. Also, what should my bread look like inside? Lots of holes or not? So I baked bread last weekend with my son, and so my timing was I did that wake up feed the night before. Then I got up with the dogs because I feed the dogs at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I fed this bulk feed then. And then about 9:30 we were ready to mix the dough. That takes an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and a half or so. And then we let it ferment, and then we were baking by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you do that maintenance feed, the wake up feed the night before, and then get up early and do that bulk feed, 3 hours later you can be making your dough and be baking by mid-afternoon. If you want it to go a little longer, you can be, mix at noon and still be baking by, 4 or 5 in the afternoon. So there's you can play around with a schedule like that. But by doing that wake up feed in the evening and then your bulk feed first thing in the morning, you can still be baking in the afternoon. So that's what I say. That's the list of questions. Again, I will jump back on the group later. I'm headed back to work in a few minutes. A little later this afternoon, I will jump back on the group. If you have any other questions, tag me in there, and I'll make sure to look at all of those and answer some questions, more questions this afternoon. Thanks for joining me in the house. Remember, you can order through our website, easytigerusa.com. You can order for curbside pickup still, for delivery in the Austin area for free. And we've got lots of things on there. The bread, the flour, the yeast, the sourdough starters still, if you want to jump in with us. And then also starting Monday, we're going to be adding some more of our regular menu items. Get that pastrami sandwich. Like I said, we're going to crank up some rye bread this week. So we're excited about that and can't wait to see you, and look for announcements about our 10,000 loaf challenge and how we're going to expand on that and keep going with it, because we've hit our goal early and we're just super excited about all the response from our community helping us to feed Austinites in need. And thank you very much. Keep on kneading, keep on winning with your breads, and keep showing them to me, because I love to see all those great breads. It's really fun. This is a great community, and I hope we keep baking even after all this craziness is over. I hope we squeeze in some bake days now and then. We won't have quite as much time on our hands, but we can find some time for some baking. Squeeze it in there. Great, thank you. Talk to you later.